ReeferMEDness, the podcast, with Trevor and Kirk.
Kirk, you had a panel discussion. This was really cool. I think this is the first time either of us had done more than one person on a Zoom call, and you had three, right? Three plus you?
Yeah, three plus me, and then one went away, and then we had two. But no, it's a conversation with three craft growers. Craft growers, we'll get into that. This is part of my search to define what craft cannabis is, and what the craft industry is, and what the cannabis industry might look like in the future. So this is a carry on from episode 55, where we talk about craft cannabis with Mr. Greening.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, my notes say we had Kylie Beaudry, Earl Oliver, and friend of the show, Paul Martin.
Yeah, Paul's back.
So Paul and Kylie, we've talked to before. Not that they're not interesting, but
episode 34 for Kylie, and season 2, episode 8 for Paul. And Paul's also got a story that we told about One Less Nurse. So One Less Nurse, surprise, is now is attempting to get into the craft, the micro grow business.
But tell me a little bit more about Earl. You have a computer science PhD?
Yeah. Kylie.
So that's not and it's cool. I'm not making fun of you at all. It just amazes me every time we hear the varied backgrounds people come from and end up in cannabis.
Well, and also the personalities, and we keep saying this. Paul's wearing a hat, kind people. They're such kind, and what I like most about it, collaborative.
Yeah. Because these guys are theoretically competitors, so the fact that they just want to be together on a call with you is pretty cool.
Well, and they organized it. I mean, I put the word out, and I know that there's other craft guys out there that I said I'd contact you. I'm sure I didn't. This is a series. I want to talk to a series of small growers. I love how we talk about how we went from the legacy market to the craft legit business. So I like how now, instead of the silver market or the black market, we can call it the legacy market. Legacy growers, I should say, pardon me, Kylie. But no, I liked it again. And it changed my understanding a little bit more about craft cannabis. Now, I'm also going to make a little dive into, we also talked to another episode that's coming up where we actually talked to a home grower who gets consulting advice by a homegrown consultant. So you and I have actually been on a little bit of an adventure learning about growing cannabis.
Yeah, no, and it's like everything else, cannabis, endlessly fascinating. So I won't call myself an expert by any stretch, but I feel like I'm getting a little more of a feel on how cannabis works medicinally, sort of we'll call it from a pharmacist's point of view. But how it's grown, still, we've talked to lots of smart people, but that's still way outside my comfort zone. So it's still really interesting to hear these people talk.
Well, let's get into this, but maybe we should introduce ourselves for a change. We never seem to do that.
Let's do that before the story.
Yeah, okay.
My name's Trevor Schufelt. I'm the pharmacist.
And I'm Kirk Nyquist. I'm a registered nurse. And we're talking to you about cannabis in ReeferMEDness, the podcast.
We are.
And
let's hear you and your panel of craft growers.
Yes, let's hear this. And the reason why this is important to us as health professionals is that because this is plant medicine, we are talking to people that grow the plant. So this is what I like about this. And Trevor, as you listen to these people, just hear the enthusiasm, hear the pride they have in their plants. This is what I like about talking to growers.
Absolutely.
Hi, my name is Kylie Beaudry, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Parkland Flower. We are a micro cultivation in Alberta. We're just outside of Edmonton, and our first product to market is going to be seeds. We're coming out with 3 types of seeds, hopefully right before Christmas. So great stocking stuffers for those growers in your life.
Okay, seeds, fantastic. Sir?
All right. My name's Earl Oliver. I run a small craft cannabis company in Delta, BC. We sell under the brand Gnome Star Craft Cannabis. We just recently launched our first go-to-market cultivars, Red Congolese, Meat Breath, and Comatose Kush. And we're in the middle of harvesting our second crop right now.
And Paul.
Hey guys, Paul Martin. I am currently under contract or working with a group of partners for a potential microcraft license under Kraft Producers Inc. And we're currently just in the licensing stage. We've had some issues with municipalities, but we are in build process now and build mode. And my job with them is lead geneticist, head of genetics, and organic SOP.
So essentially, you're all what we consider a craft grower. So I want to let's just talk about your credentials for a bit here, so we can let people know. Kylie, you're also involved with the Alberta Micro Growers Association. Can you talk a little bit about what that does?
Sure. So I'm the president and founder of the Alberta Cannabis Micro License Association, and that idea and association sort of grew out of a real gap in the marketplace for small craft growers to get together, to share knowledge, to share information, because getting through these processes are really, really difficult. And it's just a building of the community. And what I always say is that we're all really small fish in a really, really big pond. But if we swim together, we can look like a really big fish. So we just, we really want to put a little bit more of the power back into the hands of the craft growers. So they can command better pricing and a more sustainable business model for their operations.
Okay, and Earl, I know that you're not fully involved, but there's something out there called the BC Craft Supply that your grow operations involved with.
I think you're referring to the BC Craft Supply. Yeah, we did sell a crop through them. They were formerly Pasha Brands, and their goal was to essentially bring all the legacy growers into the regulated market, and they're still pursuing that. Janine Davis is a real go-getter on that agenda.
And Paul,
they sell through. No, sorry.
Finish your thought. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say they sell through Indiva in Ontario, who packages everything, and they're bringing micros on every month. They seem to be signing a few. So
okay, and Paul, your group is still pending licensure. You're working with a group of people. It's the Canadian Craft Growers.
Canadian Craft Producers Inc. Yeah, we've been a partnership for about 2 years now. Going through the entire process, and we've had, I'm sure you guys can vouch, there's been snags along the way, had to fight municipalities and other things that kind of popped up, but happy to say that we are finally in build mode, and we're getting there. But for us to give a timeline yet at this point, I wouldn't even, just because of, we just never know what's going on with Health Canada and how long the process will take. But by trade, I'm a registered nurse, palliative care for almost 10 years. I left the profession. I've also been a cannabis advocate for quite some time, and a legacy grower and genetic collector for almost probably 15 to 20 years. So
okay,
lots to learn still with the micro, but definitely bring some skill sets with myself.
Now, it's safe to say that all three of you have been growing cannabis yourselves for a while under the medicinal licenses that you had as individuals. Is that a fair comment?
Not me.
No.
Not me. No. This is literally I'm actually a computer scientist.
Okay.
PhD in computer science. I build systems for a living.
All right.
I came in as an investor in the company.
Okay.
Like many Canadians who invested in cannabis, I lost a ton of money, and I was really looking for a project. I like building things, so I sort of rolled up my sleeves and took on this project. And 3 years later, we're licensed and have a great facility, growing great product, and all right. That's my story. I'm a bit of an anomaly.
Oh, that's it, but it's interesting. That's why I have all three.
Now that I'm in it, though, I really love growing cannabis. It's like, even if you don't smoke it, it's easy to fall in love with the plant.
I can see it in all your faces. You're all just glowing.
I personally smell of cannabis right now from harvesting.
You're harvesting, yeah. So do you refer to them as the girls? How are the girls doing?
Yeah,
always?
The ladies, yeah. They're all female, so, you know.
Well, yeah, we hope. Well, unless, but I guess, but
not in my facility. I've got
exactly, Kylie. So you
I got some boys in here. Yeah, we have some boys actually growing right now, and you know, it's interesting. And I also didn't start out as a cannabis grower. I mean, I played with cannabis growing when I was in university. We all had to grow in our basement because we smoked more cannabis than we could afford. We figured we'd pool our money and grow. But I'm more of a maker. And, you know, from the last podcast that we did together, I take the raw cannabis or the extracts, and I make it into other products, mainly women focused, also patient focused on, you know, patients that are in palliative care or have cancer or epilepsy. I've worked with quite a few patients over the years in the legacy side. We kind of gave that all up right before legalization. So we didn't risk our license and started working towards getting this micro cultivation so we could control the type of cannabis that we wanted to grow, because eventually I do want to produce my own products, not just grow cannabis and sell it for bulk.
Okay, yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. So right now you're growing seeds.
We are.
So you're not growing flower that you're going to be selling to the market. You're going to be selling seeds.
We're doing both. No, we're doing both. We have flower going right now as well. Yeah, with the micro license, you know, we are immediately allowed to sell plants and seeds to anybody that holds a provincial retail license. So this was just a way that we could get to the market without going through the processing or going through another licensed producer. And it's something that we know. My grower, you know, he's been growing for 25 years. MMAR grower. You know, his mentor was a grower for 40 years, collected genetics for years. And then we also have a partnership with a breeding company right here in Edmonton. We connected with them shortly before we got licensed, and were able to bring a ton of their genetics on too, which was just a really amazing partnership. And so we've got some really interesting things coming up. Some auto flowers coming up in the spring for outdoor growers. We're really excited to release those. I think that's going to be something that the market is really looking for right now. And there just doesn't seem to be access to it on the legal side under Health Canada's regulations. Okay,
so you're growing in pods, correct? So you've got separate pods for your flowering and also for your seeds, I guess.
Yeah, so we have 8 rooms. We have eight separate rooms, all self-contained, and so we're able to do a lot of different cultivars separately and breed them separately, which is a huge advantage for us.
And Paul, I'm going to let you speak in a second, but Earl, are you also growing in more than one room, or are you growing?
So we're actually a standard license holder, but at present, we're the same size in terms of a micro. We have 2 1,000 square foot rooms.
Okay.
Yeah, 42 lights each room.
Okay. And Paul, how are you? Because I know you also do seeds, do you not?
Yeah, like I said, legacy grower. Myself personally, been making seeds and breeding since probably 5 years in. So a solid 12 years of breeding. And, you know, our group is made up of, you know, some pretty well-known contributors to, you know, cannabis historically and just genetics. I could probably list 20 off the top of my head that we have access to the actual breeder and their stock as well. And I think Kylie has nailed it. I think once this market gets saturated with good growers and good cannabis, the only thing that's going to set you apart in this industry is going to be your genetics, and not just what you can bring in from elite genetics from across the globe, but more so what you're going to create in your own facility and make your own elite genetics, which will set you apart from your competition. But I think the real pathway to go here is focusing on genetics. I think, like I said, once the market gets saturated with good growers, which it's going to, I think that's when genetics are going to be the real steal and the real thing to bet on to have success in the market, I think, long term.
Okay. And please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going jump in and just say, what's fun about, getting to this scale, like it's just so much more interesting to see the plant characteristics and being able to really differentiate, which ones how do they smell? What are the terpenes like? And partnering with testing facilities to test the terpenes and all that kind of stuff it's just been super fascinating. And I just love science and the genetics and the biology of it all. And it just really kind of, I don't know. It's just fun. It's like it's creative, and you get to choose what you like and what you love about that plant, and even just figuring out if it's going to grow better, outdoor or indoor. All of those types of features we're looking at. So, and Paul, I'm sure these are all things that you're so familiar with, over the years of growing.
Okay, I need to just understand a little bit about the process. Cannabis is so highly regulated, and we know about the licensed producers. We got standard licenses, we got micro licenses. Which one of you are prepared to explain to me how this works, and how does one get the experience to grow in this environment? Like to have these resources, you're each I imagine your ACMPR allowed you to practice and grow when you were growing, but how do you build something at this scale when it's so restrictive of who can grow and who can't? Who'd like to explain their story, how they got around that? Earl, do you want to start?
Well, I have a master grower. His name's Mike. He's been growing for 12 years. So, part of getting a licensed operation going is building a team. And maintaining them and keeping them happy. And that's also a designation under the license. He is the designated master grower. In terms of getting the license, that is that's a loaded question. It's incredibly capital intensive. The regulatory burden is immense. Security clearances are a nightmare. Our company, for a variety of reasons, it took them over 6 years to get a license. They applied in late 2013, and the primary reason that it took so long was security clearance related. We had some personnel issues that, and Health Canada, the way that they do it is they basically outsource the security clearance process to the RCMP. So to Health Canada, the security clearance is a black box until the RCMP come back with a cleared screening. Health Canada doesn't know. So in our case, 6 years went by.
So how do you grow and sort of look at your genetics when you don't necessarily have the license to grow yet?
Oh, well, in our case, all of our genetics, all of our starting materials that we brought into our licensed operation came in through an ACMPR, a major investor in our company who is also a breeder. About 2/3 of our genetics are proprietary, like that he bred. So that the ACMPRs tend to be your playground, just because, you can't really you can do a lot under a normal license, but in terms of like R&D and like product testing, like being able to actually smoke your new genetics, you can't do in the license system unless you have an R&D license. So we rely heavily on the medical, the personal medical grow side. To do experimentation.
So
that's
Paul,
kind of what we do.
Yeah,
that's kind of what we do. So we're kind of like, we're going legal, but all our partners, or not all of our partners, but a big group of our partners are just that. We're long-term MAR growers who made the switch to ACMPR, or some of us are just. I was a legacy grower, never was legal until I had my run-in with the law, and then Kirk, I had to get legal, and I always wanted to, but the opportunity came ahead. But it's a like you said, it's a playground. We get to do a lot of really good R&D work for our friends and our future colleagues, which is great. And it's that partnership that we hope that we can all meet in the middle and then do what we're all here for, and that's just put out absolutely amazing cannabis.
Can I make an assumption that the whole term gifting, one of the things in the cannabis regulations and laws is that we're allowed to gift. That's why last Christmas so many people got cannabis for Christmas gifts instead of booze. Sure. So again, what I hear you saying is that your investors, your ACMPR, your MMR, those investors are gifting those seeds and those genetics to you so that when you start your legal business, you can say that you have a product?
Well,
you have a declaration. Does someone explain the declaration?
Yeah. So under the Cannabis Act, and specifically the cannabis regulations, Section 10, subsection 2, there is sort of a one-time don't ask, don't tell policy where you can bring in, you declare in advance the number of plants and the number of seeds, and they don't ask and we don't tell where they came from.
Isn't that interesting? So this is
literally like with our company, like on the eve, like we got a license on January 31st. We had a pickup truck come and drop off genetics. You know, he just basically, we had the loading bay door open. He drove in, bloody pickup truck with a tarp over some plants, and they came in that day, 39 plants for 37.
So we had a little
cultivars.
bit, and we had a little bit of a different path to our declaration in that we had our ACMPR license in one room of in our facility. So we were keeping all our moms going and some veg plants, not a lot, because we'd have to kill plants off because we were afraid that if we went into flower and then got licensed, we'd have to destroy all these plants. So you put all of this energy, like you're running electricity, nutrients, all of these types of things, which cost a lot of money. And we were trying to keep our costs really low. So we were just keeping enough going to keep all of our moms going. And and we were delayed 10 months. So when our license dropped, everything was in the facility. Then we had to make sure that we had our CRA license in place. Now we were really ahead. I was made sure we were really ahead of that. I had multiple conversations with the Canada Revenue Agency, because if you do not have the CRA license, you cannot flip your genetics. You cannot flip your plants into flower. So you have to have both licenses in order to start flipping. So we luckily we were able to get our license that morning, and then that afternoon we had our CRA license, and then we were able to begin propagating our genetics out and getting them going.
Interesting.
And another thing that some people don't realize is that you're not supposed to, you can't have all your rooms filled up with veg plants and then flip them to flower. That's a no-no. And people don't realize that. I think it's more of a slap on the wrist, really. You have to propagate your plants out. They have to have that traceability of those plants in your facility. You're propagating them out in your facility from your starting material. You have to be able to trace that from seed or clone right all the way through. So that's where some standards and some micros have gotten hung up on that as well, in thinking that they could have all their rooms full of veg plants and just flip them. But that's not the case. And it's very much frowned upon. It's unfortunate because that would really, after being delayed for so long, that would make a huge difference, just in time, right? I mean, it cuts 2 to 4 weeks off of your get to market. But Health Canada does frown upon flipping veg plants to flower. They want you to be propagating right from the start.
Interesting. So Earl, it took 2 years for you. Kylie, how long did it take for you?
It took us from the time we submitted our license, or from construction?
Well, just when you said, I want to be commercial, submit the application.
When I submit, we incorporated our company back in 2018, and then we had the rigmarole of flipping. We had to work with the municipality. What Paul was going through there earlier. Cannabis was not allowed. Production was not. It was only allowed in one zone in our area. Which really limited the land or buildings or anything like that. So we worked with them first, and that was back in January of 2019. And then we built our facility, started that in October 1st. We sent in our license application November 22nd, and then we were licensed August 14th, 2020. So we had about an 11-month wait.
But you really got ahead of things. Like, you got yourself ready. So when the license, then you flipped opposed to, okay. And Paul, where are you at?
We were ready for a long time. It was good. But sorry.
No, that's right. Paul, where are you at this moment?
Like I said, we're just approaching year 2. So, I mean, like, it started with a vision. We had to get everybody together. That took a little time. And then we got all our partners in place and treated our vision. And then, like, the one nice thing we have going is, as much as we are in a rush to hit market, there's not a dire rush for us to get there. We are in kind of a position where everybody's comfortable, and we've kind of all prepared ourselves for this real long-winded fight and licensing process. And so in that sense, we kind of were expecting this. And like I said, we're lucky again that the partners who are investing our investment backup are very patient as well. And no one's really push, rush. So we're expecting, hopefully in 18 months, we have some really good news. But I mean, if it was 2 years at this point, I would not really be that surprised to actually have something or some sort of processing license that allows us to go to market yet. I mean, there's so much changing all the time, and I'm not really the guy that understands all the licensing part because it's quite confusing to me, but I know we're still a ways away just because of the actual process.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you built your facility, Paul?
We had, like I said, there was a bunch of fights with the municipalities, and we were kind of put on hold for a while. We had existing property we were going to convert, and then just the way the fight went and the way things ended up going, we ended up just deciding, once the municipality gave us kind of what we needed, we just decided to build new. So they're in the process now of just, I think they got all the floor in, and now they're just trying to build as fast as they can through the winter or before the snow flies. But I don't even know how that's looking with Corona. Like, it's a different time too, so it's crazy.
Yeah.
So how many rooms are you planning on having, Paul? Will you be
Oh, you're asking me the worst questions, because I've seen the blueprints a couple times, and I mean, we're going to start small. That's the idea. Like we just want to get in, and we want to have a slow start, comfortable start, and not get too big too quick. We never want to be a big player. We just want to consistently put out like the highest quality craft cannabis and the rarest genetics. So I don't know.
That's a good segue. Let's talk about what craft cannabis is. So from Health Canada's perspective, what do they define as a micro grow? What is that? Let's define that first. Sure.
That's basically any cultivation facility that has 200 square meters or less of plant canopy. So that's 2153 square feet. Anything above that is considered a standard, but that does not define craft.
Well, we're going to get to that. So it doesn't matter how many rooms you have; it's the space of greenery, the canopy,
and that includes your vertical footprint. So if you are stacking cannabis on top of each other, so in your vegetation rooms, if you're on racking and you've got your clones racked, you have to count all three levels. You can't just say, oh, it's just this footprint. You have to count all three.
Okay. All right.
Or however many levels.
It's the space, basically. How much cannabis you grow.
It's your light print footprint, basically. It's wherever your lights are. Okay.
All right, so let's just segue right into why I asked you here today. Let's define craft cannabis. I don't know if you've listened to the episode we did a couple of weeks back with Mr. Greening, and that's a local craft guy here. So what is your opinions? What's craft cannabis, guys? Paul, we'll start with you. What's craft cannabis?
It's such a loaded question too.
It is.
This causes fights.
But it's meant to be. Like, can you define it like a craft beer? So,
to me, and I'll just lead with doing this for a very long time, and still having lots of space to improve, obviously, and having the luck of having to experience and getting to experience some of the rarest cannabis strains in the world, having friends that have been breeding cannabis strains for decades, and have actually had an imprint on our Canadian historical genetic game. Craft cannabis to me comes down to, number one, quality. I think craft cannabis is usually produced on a smaller scale. I think that's the one thing we can kind of all agree, is that the larger scale and all the automated systems and all the new flashy tech, no matter how big it is and how it's supposed to put out the best, it rarely does. I think craft comes down to small craft growers who can give plant to plant attention to detail on a daily basis. And it comes down to really, I think, also the genetics that are being put forth. Okay. But I think the two main pillars are quality, and then I think just the genetics themselves. So I mean, it's just small scale produced cannabis by really good growers who live and breathe this profession. I mean, it just comes down to that quality level, which we have not seen yet. We're getting there, but we just haven't seen it yet. And I also think one last thing is, I think really as we see things go on, I think we're talking about we're going to hit a pinnacle where everyone's producing really good cannabis. I think it's going to now come down to the methods of how cannabis is produced. And I think we're going to see a big shift into what we all hope, and that's sustainable practices and more of an organic production style, where I think there's no denying the best cannabis on earth is sun-grown, organic, probiotic-grown cannabis. I don't think there's any denying that. But I think the next thing we can do, other than the sun-grown, is indoor, organic, probiotic, KNF input cannabis by a proper grower who knows his stuff. And I'll leave it there.
Well,
no fight. No fight.
That's a good topic to push back on. So, you know, to me, craft cannabis is about, you know, attention to detail. You know, same. I agree with all the mentions of quality. It's producing a product that is, you know, objectively as well as subjectively superior to everything else. You're chasing an unattainable goal of just producing a perfect product. And to do that, going back to attention to detail, you have to hand harvest, you know, hang dry to ensure that moisture drops slowly, hand trim, and just ensure that the customer is, when they receive the product, is getting something that you would be proud to serve them. And, you know, a big part of it is also the community behind it, and being transparent with your customer, and being accountable to them. And these are the things that are important to our company, and, you know, to me personally, and that's craft in my mind.
Okay. Kylie?
At craft cannabis, for me, something my grower has always said is that the best fertilizer for your plants and for your grow is the shadow of the grower. And, you know, to just expand on Paul's, it's that attention to detail. But I think it's also about, you know, it's not just about sustainability within your grow and within how you grow the cannabis. It's also about how it gets out to consumers. Because if we're looking at it from a sustainability aspect, you know, the way we worked in the legacy market is that our craft cannabis, you know, went to our local communities, and it didn't travel 4,000 kilometers across the country and back again, because it has to be processed in someone else's facility and then brought back to our province to be sold, or even sold in another province. It's about having that product fresh, reducing that, you know, I mean, cannabis just bouncing in a truck across the country, you know, to get processed and then and bounced across the country again, completely defeats the purpose of. Is that
happening? Is that happening?
Absolutely. Earl, where'd your batch go?
So our meat breath, I mean, we sold through BC Craft Supply, and our meat breath was shipped to Indiva in London, Ontario. And
to do what with? To do what with?
Well, they packaged it. So
yeah, they put it in containers. Yeah, and shipped it back.
You cut it, and you dry it, and then.
Well, we dry it, we trim it, and we cure it for 30 days.
Okay.
And then, but because we're newly licensed, we don't have sales authorization on our processing license.
Okay.
And that's a whole other regulatory nightmare that we could Kylie and I especially could complain about that all day long. So we have a processing license. We are authorized to package product.
Okay.
We are not authorized to sell our packaged product. It's ridiculous. So unfortunately, well, we have great packaging partners like Shelter and Indiva are fantastic. They did a great job, both of them. But you know, we have to sell through another processor who has sales authorization.
Is that a BC thing or is that a Health Canada thing?
That's a federal thing.
How many?
You guys?
Yeah.
You guys, do you by chance? I was just curious. I know our larger LPs are doing this, but are you guys also irradiating?
Oftentimes, because the liability sits with the licensed processor, they will require it as a vendor qualification. So, whatever their process is what you have to go with.
Yeah.
Do you see that going away at any point?
If not right now, not unless Health Canada changes the microbial requirements and the limits on that. I mean, a lot of a lot of companies, I mean, they've had recalls of cannabis that's gone moldy, and it might have tested fine for microbials, and then it gets to a consumer, or it gets to the processor or whatnot, and now all of a sudden it's covered in mold. So as much as it's the jury's out so far on
it can't be the future. It can't be our future. It can't.
And that's a part of what I'm saying, is that the cannabis should be picked up by the consumer right from our farm.
Exactly.
Farm gate, that is Kraft. That's Kraft cannabis.
Thank you.
To me, like that, and that is what we're working towards, like the ACMLA. I mean, we are really pushing hard to say, hey, look, we want to improve the quality, because our product is sitting in our shelf, right, in our vault, waiting for SKUs to be approved by AGLC or whoever, whatever province. It's sitting there waiting for approval first. Then it gets picked up, it gets distributed, and then it sits in another warehouse for who knows how long. Then it gets ordered, then it's sent again, and then it could sit in a retailer's vault for who knows how long before it gets put out on the shelf. So you've got all of these checkpoints that quite frankly, reduce the craft side of that cannabis. And that's where, farm gate and allowing micro cultivators to sell, we're talking about putting cannabis in a bag. We all did it. We all did it for years. No one died. Everyone was fine. Everybody smoked awesome weed because it was smoked before it had a chance to get moldy. So this is the things that we're kind of dealing with here. And, I get Health Canada's mandate is to provide a safe product. I agree. But at the same time, we need to realize that, at scale, they're going to have a lot more troubles with microbials and trying to keep, powdery mildew and things like that under control. We simply don't have the same kind of challenges that those types of scaled growers have. And so we should be treated accordingly with the same level of risk.
You just got the perfect answer.
I would add that
that is perfect.
Yeah. I would add that if you're able to, as a small grower, if you're able to really control your environment, keep the humidity down, and have a drying room that's set up to properly bring it down slowly, it's easy to pass your microbials. I'm confident Kylie will pass hers.
We test too. I mean, our ACMPR growers, we test regularly too, like we do, and we get clear. So
we all three of our go-to-market batches passed microbials.
And I'm gonna boot. I got stuff to do.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Follow me on Instagram. I friended you guys today just so we can stay friends.
Yeah.
Sure. What are you on Instagram?
We're under Canna Craft Producers Inc.
Okay, sounds good.
Hopefully, we're rubbing shoulders in a while.
We will do. Bye,
Thanks,
man.
Paul.
Nice to meet you.
It. So we ended the conversation talking a little bit about craft cannabis. Kylie, fantastic. Here's a question for you. Can you equate craft beer to craft cannabis when you look at the big boys? Can Molson's grow craft? Can Molson's make craft beer? Okay. Can the large LPs make craft cannabis?
No, I like. They can grow a high quality, high THC, high terpene product, that's mass produced. And, there are some large licensed producers that have produced some pretty good cannabis. I'm not going to discredit that. I think the essence of it's not just about the product, it's about the handling of the product. And I think it's truly about, especially the handling of the product once it's grown, because I think that's where some of the larger licensed producers have fallen down. When you're mass producing, you're mass harvesting, lots of times they're drying on racks as opposed to hang drying. The curing process, oftentimes they're trying to get it out the door before a real proper cure has happened. And so, I think they'll get there. They'll get to a higher quality product, but I think the difference is even just the story, like the the story behind these small producers, and they resonate in their communities. So, if you take, someone like Alley Cat here in Alberta, which has they're a pretty big craft brewer now, but they were bought by a larger beer company. But when they started out, they were small, and they built a brand in their community.
Yeah.
And that brand ballooned, to the other communities around them, and then they got the attention of, a larger producer, and then their brand was bought. Now I think there were some other things in there. They were very particular about who would buy them and things like that. Even looking at something like Burt's Bees. Burt's Bees was this little small producer of craft handmade cosmetics, and then they ended up getting bought out by a larger cosmetics company. And, not saying that it changed, but, or the values of it changed, but now you're looking at more of a mass produced product. The prices come down, your economies of scale are different. And I think really what people are looking for these days, they want to know where my product was produced, who produced it, what were the inputs, how was it grown, and I think the only way you can do that is by being close to your community and being a part of your community. When my product goes to market, I honestly have no idea where it's going to go right now. I don't know if it's going to be in Alberta. I don't know if it's going to be sold in Ontario. I don't know if it's going to be sold in BC. I would love for it to stay in Alberta. I would love for it to stay within a 100-kilometer radius of my facility. But even within the provincial regulations, my cannabis could end up in Fort McMurray, and most of it could end up in Calgary for all I know, So it's, and that's just because of the current regulatory framework that is in place, that puts those barriers up, that, it really makes it difficult for us to build that within our community. Like, all of my friends are, in the area are like, oh, I can't wait for your product to come out. Like, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? And when I'm going to have, when it comes out and it goes to a different province, they're going to be super disappointed.
So you can't sell direct.
I cannot sell direct. I don't have a processing license, and I don't have a sales authorization.
So Saskatchewan has a different system to Manitoba, because what I learned in Manitoba is that our guys sell to the Manitoba government, and then it just gets distributed that way. Is that the same as Alberta? You sell to
same as Alberta. Yeah. You sell to the provincial distributor, but no one can sell to a provincial license, like a provincial distributor or a retail distributor, like directly, like in Saskatchewan, without a processing license and a sales authorization.
Interesting. So you can't,
unless you're doing plants or seeds.
Unless you're doing plants or seeds, yes, dried flower and anything above. So dried flower, pre-rolls, and 2.0 products, extracts, and things like that. You cannot sell without a sales authorization.
So like a craft brewer, I can have a restaurant and have a craft brewery in my back, and I can sell my craft beer in my bar. You can't sell your cannabis outside your gate.
I cannot.
Is that coming?
We're working on it.
That's a good question. In BC, the NDP who just got a majority, they promised by 2022 we would have farm gate. And if you can do farm gate, I'm in BC, Kylie's in Alberta. In BC, if we can do farm gate, we will be able to sell direct, assuming we have our sales authorization on our processing license, so we can put the weed in the container and put an excise stamp on it, and are authorized to sell it. We will be able to then sell direct to the consumer.
Well, one thing you did for me today, Earl, you explained to me why I got this brand here sent to me. Yeah, it's Broken Coast. I like the product. It's consistent for me. But I was looking at it. It was packaged, or was it grown, January 28th, 2020. I got this 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And there's we don't know if it was harvested that date, packaged
or bottled that day.
Oh yeah. So. It doesn't say on it.
So the provinces, they're new at this game. and some provinces are better than other provinces. But there's where are you, Kirk? You're
I'm in Manitoba? Yeah.
Okay. So I can't speak to what Manitoba is doing, but they may not have had demand for Broken Coast. They may have already had supply. So until they sell out of everything that has already been sold to them, and then they reissue another call for product to Broken Coast.
I think I got this from Shoppers Drug Mart. I think I went.
Okay.
Oh, that's out of retail. So that's you got that through the medical stream.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So that's.
But it's still totally. But it's still a long time.
And it's in plastic.
Yeah.
And most plastics will absorb your terpenes, and they will, and then they're not as airtight.
So is that why when I was in British Columbia a year and a half ago, the cannabis that I was seeing was coming in foil packages? It was like much less footprint, but so.
Just depends on the producer.
Okay.
Just depends on what they choose to put their cannabis product in.
Yeah. So our stuff is sold in glass jars.
Jars?
Yeah, Shelter. So the company who packages our product is Shelter. They're based out of Macklin, Saskatchewan, and they put our product in glass jars to maintain the moisture.
Okay, but you have to transport it there. So you transport it there in glass jars too, I imagine.
No, we transport it in a roughly a 1 kilogram. So we're not packaging it. So I send them roughly a 1 kilogram bag. It's sealed, and it's so basically the product is still curing in that bag. And when we transport it, everything's temperature controlled, so the quality is maintained to the best degree that we can. And then they open the bags and then package it into 3.5 gram. They hand package to again ensure the quality of our craft product, and then they will then ship it back to wherever. Yeah.
I find that interesting because I'm learning more and more about growing cannabis, and I can see your passion in it. But one thing I've learned is once you harvest it, it becomes very fragile after that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, hanging it, everything's fragile.
Yeah. The biggest differentiator, back to your previous question regarding the, sort of big cannabis versus small craft cannabis is almost, I would say almost entirely actually post harvest. Like Kylie and I toured Aurora Sky back in February, and the plants in their 300,000 square foot room were beautiful.
They were healthy looking plants.
Yeah, they were great plants. They had nice big buds on them. And, when you're Aurora and you've got, literally billions, you can genetically engineer plants to have, less sugar leaf and all kinds of really neat things. And their plants were beautiful. Like I'll get them that, and I took photos, and they're great. Like I would be proud to grow those plants. But when you're at that scale, when you have 300,000 square feet of flower, how do you process that? You can't hang dry it. You just you have to have another gigantic facility to hang dry it, and so they
take the bud off the plants, and then they put it on racks to dry. But then the curing doesn't happen. Like they're not going to go in and burp, hundreds and thousands of kilograms of cannabis. It's just so labor intensive. It just does not make sense at that kind of scale. And so that's the difference with craft is, we're going to be putting it in either sea vaults or however it is that we're going to cure. It's proprietary, so I can't give too much away. But however it is that we cure, it's a hands-on, it is labor intensive. It's a hands-on, you have to be in there every single day in your vault, burping these whatever containers it is that it's in, and then making sure that, you're checking on it daily, and you just simply can't do that. At that scale. They just have not figured. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying they haven't achieved it
So
yet.
What does the burping do? What does the curing do to the flower? Like you hang it and you hang dry it so that it's loose and it's not resting, I take it. So it's loose and you put it in a well ventilated. What does curing do? What does it do?
Well, curing it when you put it in the jars, it's off gassing the moisture, right? So, but you're doing it slowly, as opposed to when it's hanging and drying. You're drying it at about a 60% humidity, and you want to preserve a little bit of moisture, but not too much. And then you're basically just off gassing it. So, you're just letting that moisture go. You're opening it up to air a little bit, and it just helps to bring out the bouquet of the terpenes. You do lose. There is terpene loss, of course, throughout the drying as well as the curing. But it just helps to develop the flavor and develop the. I'm sure there's a much more technical explanation of it.
So it doesn't change the THC at all. It doesn't change the CBDs concentrations. It's purely the terpenes and the trichomes.
Time can change. Time change.
Yes.
Time and temperature can change your cannabinoid content for sure. So you want to make sure that you are putting it in a temperature and humidity controlled environment. But yeah, it's. I don't know what the technical science. I don't know, Earl, if you can chime in on what the technical stuff is.
You got me. I can tell you that.
All we know is that it makes really good weed, man.
I don't know what the chemical process is for the volatile compounds like the terpenes.
Okay.
But they do sort of become more pungent over time.
Yeah.
The big thing is also all different buds are different sizes.
Yeah.
So a big benefit to the storing them, basically just keeping them in a bag for a long period, is you homogenize the moisture.
Okay.
So the big bud, the big giant bud, which obviously will have more moisture in it because it takes physically longer to dry, will add water to the smaller buds, the lower stuff that will go into pre-rolls and things like that. So instead of when they show up at the processor and they make pre-rolls out of them, for example, it'll be a nicer, something that was previously a little bit maybe over dry will have picked up some of the moisture from the larger buds.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I think you nailed it for me in the sense of what is craft cannabis. So homegrown, a home brewer and homegrown. So for now, right, if you really want craft cannabis to meet your farm gate, homegrown is craft, as long as it's done right.
Yeah. If your grandma bakes you cookies and then you have a box of Chips Ahoy,
right,
which one are you going to prefer?
Right.
Something that's mass produced or something that's, soft and chewy and moist and freshly baked from the oven, and it's made with love and care and attention, and just that right there, that is craft. That's craft. It's not mass produced, right?
Right.
You're talking about growers that have been doing this and advocating for this plant. We're the ones that, not just us, but, the caregivers that we've been growing for, for patients and things like that for years. And now to be given this opportunity to do it legally and not be looking over your shoulder all the time. I'm so grateful that it is legal and that I can do that. I have 3 small children. And so, wondering if you were going to get picked up by the cops one day is not a great feeling. And, it's only really recently that I've started speaking about my legacy experience because, I didn't have my security clearance and it really made me nervous to talk about my past and what we did. And, being the opportunity and being able to be out in the open about this and just the amount of support that we're getting from our community, I'm getting emotional just talking about it because this is what we love to do. And we've seen it change people's lives directly and seen what this plant can do for people. And it doesn't do it for everybody. That's the other thing. It's not everybody's cup of tea. It doesn't help with every ailment. But for the ones that it does help, it changes their life. And that's craft. Okay. I think that side is, just the love and the knowledge that you're growing a product that's going to make someone more comfortable in their end of life, or that someone's going to go sit by a fire and with their loved ones and just have a great time, and you helped build that experience even more, or you contributed to that experience. That's craft as well.
That's a great way to sort of stop this. I'm gonna ask one question, and just to sort of end it up. Where do you think the market's going? If you had your vision to live in 5 years, what would the cannabis culture business look like?
I'll go. I would say in 5 years, the dried flower market is going to be absolutely dominated by little craft operations just like us. It will, over time, as the provinces start filling out with more craft producers, it will become local just by virtue of the fact that there'll be so many, in BC that we can all supply the BC market, and so many in Alberta that can supply the Alberta market. And the largest portion of the market is dried flower, and I expect that we will be dominating it, especially at the premium end of the product category. Things like beverages, edibles, topicals, all things that where the quality of the flower going into it doesn't really matter, will be absolutely dominated by the large LPs who can produce basically the cheapest THC. Outdoor growers, gigantic 1 million square foot greenhouses that can produce the cheapest THC for input into edibles and things like that, where the flavor and the terpenes are just irrelevant. They're dominated by the chocolate or the high fructose corn syrup or the ginger in the beer or in the beverage. So in 5 years, that's what I would, just in terms of the market, that's where I would expect it to be.
Kylie?
Where I see cannabis in 5 years is a totally different industry that's being developed, and that's on tourism side, as well as things like spas, where you can have a complete. It's going to be about, the whole market is going to be tertiary. It's not just about this secondary processing, because right now we're in a secondary industry, right? It's all about the manufacturing and the processing and a consumer packaged goods. And I think, really, Cannabis 4.0 or 5.0 is going to be really about cannabis services, where, you're going to bud and breakfasts, you're doing cannabis tours, you're getting off, and, people are traveling to Canada because we're the first legalized country, and they're going to come here for a cannabis experience. You're going to be able to go to a spa, take an edible, have a super relaxing massage with cannabis topicals and cannabis massage oils. You're going to go in and have a beautiful cannabis facial, whether it's a CBD or a THC infused, or, as the research and development grows, you're going to start seeing those rare cannabinoids treating different skin ailments or skin conditions and things like that. And I think it's really going to take a place in this tertiary marketplace, where it's really about not just the product, but it's about how the product is administered, where it's not so much self-administered, but you have someone that's facilitating the experience. Because right now it's just such a personal thing that you're just only allowed to, you're only able to consume, in your house or in specific areas. And I think it's going to develop into much more of a service industry aspect.
Thank you so much. I've been keeping notes, and I got so many more questions, but I really have to let you go. and we will talk again, and we'll take you up on that when you open up your first spa. We'll get that episode going.
It's in the long-term plan for sure.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you so much, Kirk, for having us. Always a pleasure being on your show.
Oh, thank you. Hey, music choice. Can you guys come up with something? What would you like us to play on the episode music-wise?
I'm always, Sublime is my Sublime is always my favorite, but I don't know if that's really a good Sublime or, gosh.
Well, what do you listen to when you're trimming?
Podcast.
Podcast.
ReeferMEDness.
I listen to your podcast. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Probably working on Health Canada crap.
Okay.
Yeah.
But thanks again, guys. I appreciate
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, Kurt.
Okay, bye.
So, Trevor,
Yes.
what is your definition of craft cannabis?
I'm going to get people mad at me. So I'm going to kind of go the middle of the road and just so I can throw out a big word I like the terroir idea. The whole you can taste where it came from. So in wine, they talk about, you got your Bordeaux from the Bordeaux region of France. I'm picturing 2-5 years down the road where we can have cannabis tourism, and you could actually go to Kylie's operation, taste the cannabis there, and it'll taste different than if you go a little farther down the road and see Earl, which will taste different than if you traipse back to Manitoba and you talk to Paul and try his. So I think it's you're going to taste, feel, experience something different in the different parts of the country when you visit the different microgrowers.
Middle of the road, yeah. My opinion is changing, and it's changing a lot because I'm starting to understand more and more how this plant is grown. And the things that I've learned since we talked to Mr. Greening is, and I guess some of this stuff is I knew, but I needed, the box. What is that 4 box of the things you think you know, the things you know, the things you don't know, and the things you don't know, There's a name for that.
I never pictured you as Donald Rumsfeld.
Is that the box? Right?
Yeah.
Well, I believe there are things I don't know I know. And as I learn about cannabis and how it's grown, I go, oh yeah. Now, little known story, I don't know if I've shared this one, way back in the 80s, back when big hair was cool and high-waisted jeans was cool.
I had hair.
You had hair? Well, yeah, I had more. I had an opportunity to walk into a rather large legacy market, black market grow op in a basement, and I can remember the humidity. Humidity, is that the word? The water in the atmosphere, and how the adjacent bedroom walls were literally weeping because of the moisture in the air. And as you go into the sealed plastic room with an air vent into the sewer system to blow off the exhaust, you are met with this luscious jungle. And again, this is what I'm thinking, what I didn't know I knew, right? And I've also been in rooms where, Paul, I've been in his grow up, I've seen his farm. What you grow it in, like I said to Mr. Greening in episode 55 that I kind of like soil. Well, and then I admitted to you, I don't know if I could tell the difference between a soil or not, but I kind of like the idea of it grown in soil because it goes to the hippie wannabe in me that it's grown in soil. But cannabis can grow. It can be grown in all sorts of mediums, right?
Yes.
And Paul mentioned this about the fact of sustainability. When you look at cannabis grown in hydroponics, that wastewater, all that potassium, all that sodium, all those chemicals that go in there to grow this wonderful plant, gets spit out into the sewer system. Makes me wonder, what's that doing to the system, right? Pumping out all that fertilizer. The other thing about the cannabis plant, so that changes the feel. And then when do you throw the plant into flower? Because you have they talk about the veg state, and the flower.
Right, and now is because this has come up before. Explain to me and others who don't know what's veg state.
Okay, you start with a clone. You start with a seed. You grow the seed, right?
Okay.
And the seed grows, and that's the veg state. That's when the plant grows in height and bush, right?
Okay.
For a cannabis plant, unless they're autoflower, and I don't know a lot about that, but for a cannabis plant to start to flower, it needs to have its light cycle changed. And if you think about any normal, plant, in the springtime, it starts to grow, and then all of a sudden, as the sun changes its angle on the horizon and there's less sunlight, it sprouts flowers.
Okay.
Well, you artificially do this. You will now throw a plant that's in a veg state, non-flower, so it's just growing, it's vegetating, it's growing, and you can convert it to flowering by changing the light cycle.
Right.
And some people call that the what is it now? 12 and 12 is usually a veg state, 12 hours of light, 12 hours of darkness, and then you can throw it to 18. When you throw it to 18 hours of darkness versus, what is that, 6 hours of light or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure there's an art to that.
Yeah, there's an art, right? But then, and this is the key, and I think I keep going back to Mr. Greening because he's the one who first taught us about this. He made a comment about it staying local. What I liked about this panel is how they talked about how the cannabis is treated after harvesting.
Okay.
Right? Because going back to my 1980s story, going into the grow up and seeing this jungle, those flowers are resinly thick, and if you touch them, they're sticky. So there's the cannabinoid oils and sap, for lack of a better, the medicine. It's sticky. So you see the trichomes, and you can actually smell the terpenes already. So when you walk in and you can smell the plant, you can smell the terpenes. So what happens after you cut it and hang it? Now, if you lay it on racks, you're knocking a lot of those trichomes and terpenes off.
I'm going to jump in real quick. I want you to continue this, but we got to talk about all the hoops they had to go through, because Earl specifically was talking about just the way that things were set up. He had to ship his cannabis from BC to Ontario to be packaged and back. Which, right. Going back to you telling him what's the difference between rack and hanging.
Well, okay, but that's a good segue, because when you rack it and hang it, if you hang it, the plant is allowed to dry in the air, and of course, how much humidity is in the air at 50% versus 35%? Do you dry your cannabis in 3 days or 7 days or 12 days? Right? How you dry your cannabis changes the content of the cannabinoids inside and the terpenes. And if you lay it down on a rack, then you're laying it on top of all the trichomes, and you start damaging and bruising the flower, like literally bruising. So you want to hang it. That'll change the flavor. And then when you package it and trim it, do you do a wet trim or a dry trim? And that is when you're removing the fan leaves from the flower head, the bud, the Sansominian bud that you want, right? So all that takes into play the final result of the product. Now, when you talk about transporting, picture a delicate flower inside a plastic container going down the highway.
Picture, for those of you who haven't seen it, but picture a rose. What would happen if you start banging a rose around?
A dry rose.
A dry rose, yeah.
A dry rose, right? It's very delicate flower, right? So this is what I liked about when I'm getting closer to the definition of what a craft cannabis is. It's cannabis that has been cared for by someone with the passion that cares for it, but also hasn't been bruised along the way of getting to my pipe, I guess, right? So we're getting closer, Trevor. Do you think we nailed it? Do you think we nailed it, or another one?
I don't want to take anything away from these guests. They were fantastic. And another side route, when I was sort of reviewing this one, I happened to be doing flu shots because that's what I do.
It's flu season.
It's flu season. And one of the pharmacy technicians, it was very quiet, and we're in a completely separate building, and she just literally sort of sees people when they come in and takes their temperature, yada, yada, and then I poke them in the arm. So we were kind of sitting around with not a lot to do, so I was reviewing this one, and she listened to Kylie talk and said, wow, she's really smart, isn't she? Yes, she is really smart. So this is a fantastically bright panel you have, but I would love to hear more of this.
Yeah, I think we got to go off and get another panel and have other discussions like this. And maybe someday we'll even put these things on YouTube so people can see that we changed our shirts.